Hey guys, today we're going to make an Argent metal track inspired by Mick Gordon's Doom soundtracks, and it's going to sound like this. So that's a little snippet of what we're going to create today, and I have some presets here that I made, and we're going to go through each element of this track one by one as we build it from scratch. And as you are about to see, this genre is really hard to produce. Argent metal requires like a completely different approach to most metal. The way we approach the guitars, the drums, the sound design is all just going to break every rule, but that's what Mick Gordon does. He makes his own rules. So before we get started, big announcement, my Modern Metal Pro course just dropped the day before this video is being published. So if you want the deepest dive imaginable on the whole process of writing, producing, mixing, and mastering modern metal, go check that out. With that being said, let's start making this track. So let's start with an intro, and I'm going to lay down a chromatic guitar line. I'm in drop A, but we're going to use the Morgan amp suite, which the first thing we want to do with it is use the transpose knob, and I'm going to drop this all the way down to low C. Mick Gordon likes to tune as low as physically possible, so that's what we're doing. And you may be surprised to see a lower gain amp here. I mean, I do have the two overdrives here boosting the amp, so there's a little bit of grit to it, but we kind of want this sound to be chill because it's the intro and it's going to tease this heavier riff that's going to kick in a minute. So it's going to be this chromatic. All right, that sounds good to me. Let's lay down a dissonant chromatic riff. And the first thing I want to do here is just cut out these silences and make it super, super tight. And let's even add a little glitch here. Da-da-da. Like... Alright, and those last couple of notes, let's move this onto this duplicate I made where we're going to put some effects. Just before it drops, I want to make sure it feels like everything's kind of changing and things are moving around. Like this genre has to just feel like constant new sounds everywhere. So why don't we pitch this one up to C, so 12 semitones higher. And let's just whack the auto filtering Cubase on it. Let's cut this up again like we did before. Ba-ba-boom. All right, now I want to mirror that guitar riff with this synth track, which we'll talk about in a minute because this is like a chill intro version of this guitar synth sound, which we're going to kind of dive deeper on in a minute. So for now, let's just program in the notes. So it's a low C. By the way, I get a lot of requests for Vital preset packs, so I've decided to put all the presets I've made for this track for sale in the description for $2, so check that out if you want Vital presets. Okay, now I want to emphasize that first beat with some like industrial synths. Something like that. Let's start with this sine, which is a standard modern metal trick. You've seen me do this on the channel. It's just a sine basically with a bit of saturation. And for this one, I'm just going to program in our root note of C, but let's just slide the pitch down like that. That one's just there to fill out the low end, but then we're going to use this sound, which is just kind of a harsh industrial sound I made. But then I ran it into archetype nollie, so we get this kind of really hard driven, almost guitar-like sound. And from there, I'm also going to run it into a chorus, so we get this kind of sound. Big and digital and all-encompassing. So with those two synths together, we get this kind of industrial. So that's starting to get somewhere, but I need that first count to really hit hard. So now we're going to need some impacts. And this is one thing that Mick Gordon and Argent Metal does a lot more than the rest of metal, which is using samples. We want samples everywhere. This is what's going to really bring the song to life and give it that cinematic quality. So it's more than just a song. It's like an experience. Let me show you. So we want a lot of impacts, like there's this really good Eminence sample pack, which I'll put in the description. It's free, not sponsored, just a great pack. And we want sounds like that. For sure, we want that one. I want my explosion for sure. And my Hans Zimmer sample, I'm going to use that for sure. Oh, and we're definitely going to want a riser to give it that like huge suspense as we build towards the riff. Yeah, a nice long one like this. Yeah, that's what we need. Let's bring a load of these in. All right, let's try all of these. Perfect. So this is just like a stack of big energetic sounds. You know, all just working together to make it sound huge. We'll introduce that riser like towards the end. And let's add a little gun noise there right before the drop. Here's a load of samples that I found online. Let's see if we can find something cool. That, okay. Let's cut that out. And I'm gonna just make this go chin chin boom. That's going to be sick. See, this is why I love samples. You can't get that extreme violence from just like guitars, bass, and drums. This takes it to another level of heavy, and it just gives it that like cinematic soundtrack kind of vibe. And since the intro is still kind of sparse here, let's fill it out with some more orchestral elements. Let's bring in the UJam drums plugin. This thing has major Hans Zimmer vibes, very epic and cinematic. Exactly the kind of thing Mick Gordon would put in an intro. And we don't have to go over the top with this. Let's do that the first time, and then we'll build a bit more intensity on the second time round like this. Let's take the orchestral vibe even further with UJam strings too. Again, super Hans Zimmer sounding, and we'll keep it nice and minimal. Maybe we get a little dissonant there. Alright, then I have these two kind of pulsing bass sounds I made. And we're going to just keep that as a low C note like that. No melodic content needed here. This is just for the vibe. Here's the second like pulsing sound, a slightly different one. See, all of these things are just to keep it ominous and dark and intense and just building towards something heavy. And this is all stuff Mick Gordon does to really make it a soundtrack and not just a metal song. All right, that's our intro. Now it's time to get heavy, and I want to start here with the drums because the drum sound is going to be an important part of what gives it the sound. So I'm going to be using the Mixwave Gojira kit, but we're going to process this thing into oblivion. Let's start by just programming in the beat, and it's just going to follow the notes of this riff. So it's bum 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 bum. So it's going to be crashes, and I'm just going to whack everything up full. This doesn't have to sound human. It doesn't have to sound natural. It just has to sound as full on as possible. So come into the processing. Firstly, this kick is going to be hard gated. Again, doesn't have to sound human. We can digitize the crap out of this kick. And as far as the EQ for the kick, it's going to be fairly standard metal stuff, except for what we're doing with the high end. Usually I would never boost here on a kick drum. Definitely not this much, but for this kind of sound, you need it absolutely cutting through the mix like insanely hard. So even after that EQ move, I want to take the kick a little bit further with some OTT. And some fresh air. Usually you want to be careful with OTT, but for this kind of genre, it's like OTT on everything. You know, this has to sound as lively as possible. Nothing sounds more lively than OTT. And fresh air just makes the high end that little bit more pronounced without making it more harsh, which will just make it really slap right through the mix. Moving on, this Gojira snare, it sounds great, but this needs to have some real weight to it. So it sounds a little bit thin. So we maybe want to boost some low mid or low end quite a lot. Let's find a bit more of that snappy top end as well. All it needs now is OTT for that explosive tail. That almost turns our metal snare into like a semi-dubstep snare, which is exactly the kind of sound we want. And lastly, the cymbals. Let's of course whack up the OTT on those. And we don't want to compress any low end here. And let's also bring up an EQ because we really want to make sure we have no low end here. We want these cymbals sitting on top of everything else in the mix, occupying this space up here. Okay, so that's our main drums sounding great, but Mick Gordon wouldn't stop there, so we're not going to stop there. You know, the snare's sounding huge, but a Doom snare would definitely be even huger. So I want to use the Nemesis drum kit for some industrial snares. Okay. I like both of those. Maybe we use the hi-hat too. So let's just layer this over our main snare like this. Let's try that hi-hat. And let's of course keep all of those samples going so that it just explodes every time our guitar riff repeats, which we'll get to in a second. So coming to the guitar sound, it's hard to say exactly what the Doom guitar sound is because the whole magic of that sound is the way that the synths and guitars just seamlessly blend together to just create this huge wall of sound, so it can be hard to fully differentiate them from each other. But the guitar tone is definitely something along these lines. So I've made a preset here on the left and right. Let me just put the left one in the center so we can just focus on that. And this one's going to be the Archetype Gojira amp. Let's bring it down to the note of C again, nice and low. And we're starting off simple. I'm just using the amp, not touching any of these pedals or anything. It's just going to be the amp. And that sounds cool, you know, it's nice and low. But no matter how hard I pick, it's not got like that twangy, springy pick attack that we need. You know, that's such a signature of Mick Gordon's guitar sounds. And one way we can get there is by using a preamp. So let's use my favorite preamp, SS11X, and I'll turn it off and on a few times so you can really hear what it's doing and listen to the pick hitting the strings. Listen how it bounces. Now it's starting to get there. It still sounds a little bit dull, so surprise, surprise, let's use this guy to make it more in your face. That helps a lot, and now comes the sad part where we have to lose all the low end, which is going to make our guitar sound kind of thin. But we need this space down here to fill it with the big bass synths that we're going to add. All right, so I'll put this back over on the left, and that is our left and right guitar sound, but then we're going to send those into their own guitar bus, which I have down here, and let's just start by applying a little bit of fresh air just to get the shiniest top end possible, and then we're going to run it into OTT again. I don't think I've ever done this before for guitars, like put OTT on the guitar track, run them into a bus and put OTT on it again, but like I keep saying, it has to be as in your face as possible. OTT is going to get us there. As you can hear, the guitar is really starting to get quite harsh on the top end, but we actually need that because once we've filled out this mix with some huge bass sounds, that high end is what's going to help the guitar to still be prominent in the mix. So let's lay down this riff on the left and right. And once again, let's grab the scissors and we want to make this all super, super tight. Also, those quick little palm mutes, let's like cut those like this. All right, now we want to fill out this riff with some synths, and you remember these two that we added at the start? The sine wave and then the one that was going into the Archetype Nolly. Let's start with those two, and we're just going to perfectly mirror exactly what our guitar is playing. Okay, so that starts the synths off, but we need two more important synth sounds to really give it that Doom vibe. And firstly, it's going to be this one, which I actually found in like a cyberpunk pack by Ghost Hack, which has this really cool filtering that gives it that kind of dubstep sound. So let's just copy this and put it there. So we're like building a stack of synths here, basically. And the important thing about that sound is how it gives us this attack and not much else. So it's this like, you hear that right as the note hits. That's going to help to emphasize that kind of twang we were talking about in the guitars. A lot of what we're doing is just compensating for how low we've tuned, because you kind of lose energy. It gets kind of dull if you tune this low. So these are the kind of things Mick Gordon does to make it have that kind of energy, even though it's super low. Okay, and lastly, to like finish off this stack of synths is probably the most important one here. And I designed this one to kind of sound like a guitar, which might seem kind of weird because we have guitars, so why would we try and make the synths sound like a guitar? But this is kind of the magic of Argent metal. You want to blend the synths with the guitars in a way that it doesn't just sound like some guitars and some synths. It wants to sound like one hybrid, like alien instrument. So like the last sound, you can see this one really is emphasizing the attack because I'm basically trying to mimic a guitar here. So we have that strong pick attack and then it kind of drops down to a sustained note. And we have quite a bit of distortion on this one and then even more distortion from Decapitator after it. I'm kind of using Decapitator like a guitar amp here. Like we need that hard distortion on this sound to kind of blend it with the guitars and just make it all sound like one big monstrous instrument. And taking that even further, I then have a stereo enhancer pushed all the way out on this sound. And again, that's because our guitars are all the way out on the left and right so that the synth is in the same place, kind of blending in with the guitar as much as possible. Let me mute that one and then I'll bring it in and you'll hear how it brings the mix to life and gives it that Mick Gordon energy. It's a super important part of the sound. Okay, next we're going to want a high synth to sit on top of all of this, and I've put together this sound. Very Mick Gordon, and if you want a breakdown on this sound, my Motionless in White video a few weeks ago had a really detailed breakdown right at the start of the video on this exact sound, so check that out. And for this one, let's start off just kind of emphasizing a couple of notes. But then halfway through the riff, let's go really high and like chromatic. You need those high chromatic leads to really make it just feel like the world is ending. And at this stage, you may be thinking, where's the bass guitar? And I'm actually not going to lay down any bass in this track. Most of the Doom stuff to me sounds like guitars on top with like huge synths carrying all of the low end. So that's the formula we're going to follow. And sometimes there is bass guitar in Doom tracks, but I'm pretty sure it's kind of done in the same way that we've done our guitars, where you kind of get the texture of it sitting on top. You'd want that grinding, distorted high mid-range from the bass guitar if we had it, but it still wouldn't really be handling the low end and carrying the power of the song because it just can't do it in the way that synthesizers can. So I'm sorry bassists, but synths are kind of the magic here for getting that wall of sound that locks in with your guitars and gives you that unique Argent metal kind of sound. So at this stage, I want to build out the second part where it's going to get even heavier, but before it does, we're going to get super cinematic and build a lot of tension here. It's going to drop right down. Let's bring back those pulsing bass synths just on the C note from the intro. They're just going to give it that atmospheric sound. And then we have a duplicate of this sound we just put together, the kind of guitar synth kind of thing. I have a duplicate here, but you can see we've low passed it right down so that it's not got any high end. And then I've like really drenched this one in reverb with Brainworks Aura. And this one's going to start teasing the next guitar riff, which is going to be this kind of, again, very dissonant, chromatic kind of sound. That's already building so much tension just in the background. We really want it to drop down here. Okay, and here halfway through, let's start ramping up the energy so we can build towards that huge guitar riff that you heard at the start. That's what we're going to record next. So let's use that sound that we ran into Archetype Nolly from the beginning. Get super cyber. And let's just maybe jump it up to the actual like guitar synth track we made. Really get aggressive. Let's lay that down on guitar too. This wants to get super, super nasty, just building towards the heaviest drop. And once again, we're going to reach for the scissors here and chop everything up because tightness is key and it needs to sound digital and it doesn't have to sound human at all. So we're going to cut everything super surgically, super, super tight. So it's not human at all anymore. This wants to sound alien and digital. There, nice and tight. Right here, I want to really build that tension more. So let's bring in the UJam drums plugin again. Right there, I want to add this dubstep growl sound I put together. Let's go super, super low. Demonic. Okay, and lastly for this section, I want to just bring in this little hi-hat sample and I'm going to kind of go for like a, let's go for like a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So we'll bring down the volume on the 2 and 3. So we get this kind of And then towards the end, let's make it like super fast. This is more like an EDM trick than a metal trick, but it's a foolproof way to just build attention. And again, just a very Mick Gordon thing to do. It's like a drum roll, like a snare roll almost. Okay, we are so ready for that to drop and get as heavy as possible, but just before we do it, I want to add one more little sample, and it's going to be a scream sample. Oh yeah. Drowning it in reverb. That's going to hit so hard. And again, that's going to give it that cinematic vibe. It makes it sound more like a soundtrack. Okay, for the second drop, we are now going to get as heavy as possible. So of course, we're going to start with all of those impacts again from before. Let's also take that Nemesis kit that we like the snare from and copy that over. Stay with me here. We're just kind of building this out, but this is going somewhere. So let's bring back in the sounds from this Gojira kit that we set up and program a new beat, which is going to go off that riff. Or it's a variation on that. This is building towards the riff. We'll track the actual riff in a second, but it's going to be ba-dun, da-dun, da-dun, dun. And we'll go for crashes, but let's throw in like an offbeat hi-hat just to really make it groove. And again, same trick as before, make everything inhumanly loud. So let's build out the stack of synths again with this new riff we're going to be doing. And we're going to start an octave up, and then this one's going to be really chromatic, and we're going to pitch bend up each note that we hold out like this. And you're going to see in a second, this is like the most doom thing ever. So let's copy that audio and put it on our 4 synth tracks. The sine wave that's super low, the amped one going into Archetype Nolly, the ghost tack one with that pick attack, and then this last one that has all that energy to sound like a guitar. Okay, and before we lay down our huge guitar riff on this, let me just go to this lead sound again, and I'm going to lay down our root note of C, but we're going to make it like a siren. This has to be done. Just makes it feel like the world's going to end. So we're going to pitch bend. And before I show you how that sounds, I'm just going to go into our synth stack here at that end measure. I'm just going to cut every note like this. You'll see why I'm doing that in a second. Trust me, this is going to be insane. And in this little gap after that, I'm going to use this little sword sample that I found online. All right, now that we've done that, we can go back to our guitar sound, and this is going to be insane. And you'll see why I just did all the things that I did. So let's get it tracked. You see now why we cut up all the MIDI here so that we like get that quick little digital thing. And over here as well where I added that sword sample, and again I cut everything up. Let's do that here. Check this out. So this guitar riff here, this is all about getting that genty low twang I keep talking about. I'm bending behind the nut there, and then bending to get that sugar, like elasticy sound, but also just hitting really hard on the higher notes gives us that twang. Like I'm pretty much hitting as hard as I can without snapping my strings to just get it bouncing. It wants to sound like it's like a snapping elastic band. All right, and that is it, guys. That's everything we need to get this killer doom-inspired sound. So we'll listen to the whole track in a second. I hope you guys got a lot out of this one. It was definitely one of the most fun ones for me to do so far. I love producing in this style, so let me know below if you want to see more Argent metal kind of content on the channel, and just let me know what kind of content you want to see in general on the channel. And like I said at the start, if you really want to dive deeper on all of this stuff, check out my Modern Metal Pro course in the description. I've been working hard on this thing for like a year to make sure it is really special and can propel you towards being the producer, mixing engineer, mastering engineer, and songwriter that you want to be. It's like 7.5 hours of pure value content, no filler whatsoever, just all the tricks, all the secrets, everything you don't see on the channel. So if you're really someone who's serious about music, it's not just a hobby for you, you live and breathe this stuff, and you are ready to just put in the hours to make your music the best it can be, this course is definitely for you, and I would love for you to check it out. As always, thank you so much for watching if you made it this far. I'm going to stop talking now so that we can check out the full track. Here it is. Hit the like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want more content like this. See you guys in the next one.